I am just going to turn this over to Colleen, who is going to dazzle us with Unpacked. And I'll let you introduce whatever you want to say about yourself as part of your piece. We will be going until, with question and answer, no more than 90 minutes. Then we'll take sort of a stretch break so Colleen can change her mind, her headset, her space, and we'll come back after that for feedback. So here is the sign-in sheet. I want Squeak to see that I'm handing this out and not forgetting about it. And so please initial or hand.
Hello. Welcome. Thank you for choosing my presentation today. I'm really happy to have you all here. A lot of familiar faces now that we've all gotten to know each other yesterday. Again, my name is Colleen Callahan-Pandey. I am a Blue 67 in the IE, and I believe we're all IE in this room unless you guys are something different. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, I feel, and it's kind of nice. I think a lot of us will know the vocabulary that I'll be talking about, but just in case, I do have some things that are up around the room, and I will be making a point to bring your attention over there. Before we even get started, I put a few of the acronyms that I mentioned in passing, or some more than in passing. WPI is the institution I work at. So if you kind of get lost, IGSD might also be confusing. That's Interdisciplinary and Global Studies Division is what they call our broad office. But these are here for you if I say something that you might not know that might help orient you a little bit. And there are some other things around that I'll discuss in a moment. But I just wanted to kind of start off by asking if, and I'm assuming I know the answer, how many of you have had an international or intercultural experience before? Wow, that's a real surprise. Now, after you've had, and I'm sure you probably have had many, after you've had these experiences, have you ever had a structured re-entry after that experience? Have you come back and joined a program that was just explicitly for re-entry? No? Maybe some people have? Okay. Have you ever returned from an experience and it's still kind of like weighing on your mind, and it's almost like you've got something like stuck in your teeth and you're like, oh, I have to get at it, and I just don't have the time, I don't have the space, I wish there was something more that I could do, but I just don't have anything to do for that reflection. Have you ever felt that way? You've come back from an experience? Great. I know I have. So I'm hoping that this program will help some of the people that I work with at WPI have a space to look at unpacking some of these issues. If they've come back from a study abroad program, they're an international student in the United States, and they've got some of these cultural issues that they want to reflect on more, and hoping this program will be a space where they can do that. So, before we move forward, what I'm hoping that you'll take from this presentation is I'm going to be talking about, it's a little bit different than probably what you're used to thinking when you're thinking about an IE program. It's a program, but the program is creating a publication. So what I want you guys to take away from this presentation is why an international and intercultural publication would be a good IE program. And I also want you guys to take away some tools if you wanted to potentially replicate something like this at your home institutions. Some tools that you could take away, some points that you could kind of start from if you wanted to start doing a similar program at your institution. All right, so the program, the publication that I created is called Unpacked. And the idea for this came from, originally I kind of actually wrote the whole capstone and I didn't have a name for this publication. I wasn't sure what to call it. I had like whole lists of things I was trying to come up with, look through the thesaurus to see every variation of like journey and travel and this and that, and nothing was really fitting. And I reread my capstone, and there was a sentence right in the introduction that was there the whole time. It just kind of jumped out at me. And it was, when we return from a trip, we are quick to unpack our clothes and our souvenirs, but we do not generally give ourselves an opportunity to unpack our experiences. So this is like our friend the monkey here. He just got home from something really fun and interesting, but he just threw his luggage in the drawer and he didn't give himself time to reflect on what he did. And it's a missed opportunity. And I think that there are a lot of these missed opportunities that happen, and I'm hoping that this program will help connect back into these missed opportunities and make them not missed opportunities. We want people to express and reflect and talk about their experiences that they've had. Okay. Actually, if you let me kind of back up really quick. I put the click guidelines up here as well. My program looks a little bit different than the traditional click. Most of the pieces are there, but you'll see some pieces look a little different. In particular, curriculum, I think, is a little bit different, and I'll talk about that more as we get to that space. I think it still exists, but it just looks a little different. And I actually didn't really talk about that much in my paper, but in doing this presentation, I kind of saw it. Logistics, too, I think is a piece that looks a little different. I kind of think of logistics as more the technology aspect of the program that I'm working with. And then health and safety and crisis management also looks a little different. It's not really in my paper. We don't really, I don't think, need a health and safety section since it's going to be something on a campus. If there is an issue, we can just kind of jump into whatever the campus protocol is for that. And then also, just to kind of run through the agenda very quickly, we're going to go through the intro, background, and objectives in the first third of the presentation. Then the needs assessment and literature review. And the NASA survey and publication review, which will make more sense as we get closer to that. And then we'll kind of round it out with the design plan and the conclusions. Okay, so now back to the PowerPoint. So let me kind of orient you a little bit to the institution. I work at a place called WPI, Worcester Polytechnic Institute in central Massachusetts. It's an engineering school, engineering and hard sciences. There's also a school of business. There's about 5,300 students between the undergrad and graduates. Again, popular majors, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, chemical engineering, computer science. 70% of the population at the school are males. So these are two of the populations that in literature study abroad, they're the difficult populations to get to go abroad. In part because science and technology classes are very sequential, they're very difficult to get out of the lab, particularly if you're going for a long period of time. And then there's also some literature about how I think male students in the college age, they are more group-oriented, and if their group isn't going abroad, like their fraternity, they want to kind of be part of that group, that inclusive group, so they're a little bit less likely to sign up for something different, like study abroad. But WPI is actually doing something very different. So we have this kind of difficult group of students to encourage to study abroad, but our institution actually sends some of the largest numbers of engineering and science students abroad of any place in the United States. Last year, we had 625 students study abroad, including half of the junior class, which for our population is huge. It's really big. And there are lots of different reasons that we're able to do that. In part, our semester looks a little different. Instead of having 14 weeks, we have 7-week semesters, so they're not gone for the same period of time. Instead of like perhaps a traditional idea of study abroad where either you're enrolling in a school or a university or you're doing an island program somewhere, they're essentially doing a project-based internship, so they're getting some practical experience that they can put back on their resume, so it looks a little bit different as well. With that said, we're sending a lot of people abroad, we're doing a lot of international things, but it's still very much about the project that they're doing and the work experience that they're getting. They're not discussing anything about culture. It's as if they're doing their internship in Namibia could be done in Boston, that it doesn't make sense. There's a huge piece there that they're not discussing. And they have whole conferences actually on campus about their projects, and the word culture never shows up. WPI is international in other ways. Here's a little picture of campus for you. We have 967 international students, so about 18% of the undergraduate and graduate classes. We have them from 80 different countries right now, from every continent, pretty much. We have a lot of international and intercultural groups on campus. We have a lot of international faculty and staff. Well, faculty, mostly faculty and postdocs. Of about 230 faculty, we have 42 that are on some of these work authorization visas that prove that they're from a foreign country and they're here working in the United States. We also have some domestic people working at the university. Maybe you would, obviously when you kind of think about international student advising or study abroad or international recruitment, you kind of think of people working in those fields that are really interested in studying or traveling abroad. But there are a lot of kind of unsung international travelers kind of hidden away at the university as well that, I don't know about. I ran into one person just from doing this research that had spent the last year backpacking through Asia and has traveled to over 30 countries. And it was only because I started prodding people at the university that I found out about this. So I think that there's a lot of that going on, and we're kind of missing out on these opportunities to talk about it. So not to be a dead horse, there's another new campus really quick. I wanted to just talk a little bit, kind of like a pre-needs assessment. In 2008, when I first started working at WPI, I was working in this IGSD, this study abroad office, and they hadn't been doing anything to do with re-entry. Admittedly, they were just like, look, we're busy, we don't have time to do it, we know that people probably need something, can you do a needs assessment survey and see if we can find out? At the time, I sent out surveys, got 132 responses. Of those students, they were students who had recently gone abroad. 79% were unaware of any re-entry support, which makes sense. The office was saying pretty much there was nothing that they were doing. And 30% said they experienced some kind of re-entry or readjustment difficulties. Now, 30% you could say perhaps is a huge number of those students, but we're still not reaching a certain population of our students that's saying that they would have wanted help. What type of program are they looking for? I kind of had a whole list of different options that students could choose. To just quickly go through, 34% of the students said that they would want to do an annual photo contest. 15% said they want to submit an article, blog, or of their experience to a journal, newspaper, or website. 25% said they weren't interested in anything. Now, I work at an engineering university, but I'm really bad at math. But I think 34 plus 15 is a lot more than 25%. So 49% of the people were interested in some sort of creative or reflection-oriented activity. And, that's quite a lot, in my opinion. Another interesting finding was that 20% of them wouldn't have been interested in going to a specific event, like if you had a re-entry pizza party or something like that on Saturday night. But they said they would be interested in doing something that they could do on their own time. Something like submitting to a photo contest or sending in a reflection about something. So what did I do with this information? Even though I don't work with the study abroad people, I work in international student advising. International Education Week is kind of my baby. I've been organizing the week every year since I've been working at the university. It's a terrible week. I don't know what the State Department was thinking when they decided to do it. It's the week before Thanksgiving. No one was ever in the right minds weeks. And WPI, it's even worse because of these 7-week terms. It's right smack in the middle of midterm week for a midterm. So this year, instead of doing just the week at our institution, we're going to call it International Education Month. And we're going to spread out the programming throughout the entire month of November to try and get people more aware of what's going on. But anyway, after the survey that I did in 2008, we started doing photo contests as part of International Education Week. And people love it. They really enjoy, the students get really into it, the faculty and staff really enjoy seeing the pictures, the marketing people always contact me and say, can we use these in our alumni magazines? So people are enjoying it, and I think that that also feeds into the need and interest on campus for something like this. Also, being engaged with this as well, I wanted to have something for my international students, something equally creative that they could be doing. Our Chinese students actually did something on their own, where they were doing photo displays in the library of the cultures and regions of China. So I think, being that they did that of their own initiative, that also shows that there's interest and need to want to do something like that. So it all kind of came together this spring when I went to a conference at Wellesley on International Careers Consortium. A friend of mine who works in study abroad at Brandeis, in passing, it wasn't the main focus of her conversation, but in passing she mentioned that their study abroad office had this magazine that a student group created, and it was only for study abroad people, but they just, they had started it a few years ago, and it was called Wander, Brandeis Abroad. And even though she just mentioned it in passing, it was like the light bulb went off. And I was like, yes, this is the piece that I've been missing. And it's funny because even back in 2008, when I never even thought about this capstone, the pieces were kind of already there. So it was interesting how it all fit together. So basically, the program objectives, as I mentioned earlier, the capstone is basically creating a program that is related to reentry and cultural adjustment. And the program itself is about creating a publication. So I know that kind of sounds a little bit convoluted. In my mind, I kind of feel like the publication is like the end result of the program. They're kind of in my mind a bit one and the same. The goal of the program is to create a way for people to reflect on international and intercultural experiences and to increase visibility, awareness, and dialogue of international and intercultural activities on campus. Another interesting thing about this program is that the participant can be seen in two ways. There's two layers to it. There's an active participant and a passive participant. An active participant is somebody who is actively involved with the publication, either through submitting something or designing and creating and putting it together. A passive participant is a reader, but even just as a passive participant, I believe that somebody can still get something, learn something from the program. Any member of the community can be part of the program. They can be either active or passive, including undergraduate, graduate students, faculty, and staff. Anyone can be involved. The participant objectives, we want people to be encouraged, people who have had past, ongoing, or future international and intercultural experiences to actively reflect on them. So the objective is to get them to reflect. Whether they're reflecting because they're creating something for submission, or they're reflecting because they read something that triggered a memory or an experience that kind of brings it back and they have another opportunity to reflect. We want to get people talking. That's the goal. We want people to talk. We want people to see what's happening on campus. Okay, so to transition to the actual needs assessment. I mentioned the kind of pre-needs assessment from a while ago. The needs assessment that I did was through SurveyMonkey. It was a 4-question survey. It was sent out to students and employees through the email listserv. And I was debating whether I should say this, but I still think it's kind of interesting. My husband said that this is not statistically significant, but I don't care. There was a 10-day period of time where I was collecting data, and because of the way the listserv moderators worked, I sent the email at the same time, but different groups got it in like waves, pretty much. The faculty and staff got it first. The graduate students got it a few days after, and the undergraduate students got it a few days after that. And I thought it was interesting that even though I got the information in different population waves, the number of people interested in participating in the program was the same, whether it was just the faculty would answer it or as they both went. So it remained consistent pretty much at 70% of people interested in submitting something to the magazine, and 90% of people interested in reading the magazine, which really blew me out of the water. I was expecting maybe 50% of people interested. 70 and 90 really, really threw me. Very excited, very, very excited, but I was not expecting those results. So basically, the numbers that we got were also, it was only 8% of the campus responded to the survey, but the percentages were very reflective of the percentages of the actual population at the university. So 61% of undergraduates responded, 13% of graduates, which is a little bit off, 11% of admin and staff, pretty close, 9% of faculty. 6 people didn't identify. Maybe they were having some identity issues. I didn't know. So basically the question's pretty straightforward. The first one I wanted to know who was answering. So the first question actually was inclusive of the previous slide as well, but I thought it was easier to show this information this way. The other 3 questions that were in question 1, our answers were, I have traveled abroad for WPI-related work. 151 people said that. I have traveled abroad for non-WPI-related work or pleasure. 326 people said that. And I'm international, meaning I was born and grew up somewhere else. So, still pretty decent numbers of people who answered had these international connections. Okay, so can numbers 1, 2, and 3 stand up, please? Okay, so, actually, hold on before I have you. Actually, yes, number 1, can you open up your paper and tell me what it says?
As international students, it would be great to talk about our home countries so people, American and other foreigners, who are not familiar with our country and culture get a chance to get to know them.
So that was one of our responses that we had to the survey. Number 2?
I would love to read stories from other people's experiences, for pleasure and for perspective on different places and cultures.
Great. And then again, another response. And number 3?
This sounds like a very interesting idea. I believe that not enough people even realize how different most other places around the world are from the places we live, and having a student contribute a publication to share experiences would be a very useful way to give WPI students perspective on travel from eyes very similar to their own.
Great. Thank you very much. So those were kind of from the mouths or from the fingers of some of our responses. Okay, question 2. Would you submit? Again, I already mentioned 70% of people chose either very interested or somewhat interested. So I was very satisfied and surprised by that answer. Question 3, would you read? 90% between very interested and somewhat interested. And number 4, are you interested in helping? 196 people said yes. And there was an additional question, not a question, but like, if you said yes to this question, you had the option of leaving your name and your email if you wanted to help. And 104 people left their name and email, which, of course, I didn't expect 104 people to come to the planning meeting. It's still not in my wildest dreams would I expect 104 people to say that they would be interested in helping with something like this. So it's very affirming, I think, that this is a good program to have at WPI. Okay, so there are lots of suitcases throughout this presentation because we are unpacking and reflecting. So if you can guess the correct number of suitcases at the end, I have a cookie for you. All right. So we kind of discussed as we went through. As I mentioned, 8% of the campus population responded to the survey. 8% is not a huge number. You could say maybe it's the 8% of campus that's like most excited about international things and everyone else could care less. You never know. But even if you just say that that's the case, and you just took the people who said very and somewhat interested in reading a publication, if you added those numbers together, that's still 431 people who are either very or somewhat interested. And I'll take that. 431 is a good start. But I would beg to differ. I think that there are even more people who are interested. The survey was sent out in June. Campus is quiet in June. A lot of the students have left for the summer. They may not be checking their email Faculty who are probably most apt to be traveling at that time have already potentially left and maybe are not on email. So even after I closed down the surveys, I was getting a few responses saying, oh, I wanted to take that survey, why the link's not working, can you send me the link? So I think that there's even more people that are out there that would potentially be interested. Another thing I wanted to mention, I used a 4-point rating scale, and I should know better because I took an evaluation class that, a 5-point scale is a better indicator of how people feel. It's very possible that there's no kind of neutral point, that a lot of the people who clicked somewhat interested are just kind of like, interested, but they didn't want to sound negative, so they said somewhat interested. So if I were to do this again, it would make more sense to do a 5-point rating scale than a 4-point rating scale. But I still think the numbers are so skewed positively that it's still a good indicator. Okay. So now we're going to start kind of moving into the lit review section of the presentation. I have 3 definitions up here. I just want to draw your attention to very quickly. We'll talk about them as we go through, but in my paper I had several definitions for some of these things, but these are the 3 definitions I think kind of fit the unpacked situation the best. So reflection, the definition I have up here is reflection consists of those processes in which learners engage to recapture, notice, and reevaluate their experience, to work with their experience to turn it into learning. So out of the 3 or so definitions I have, the reason why I thought that fit unpacked the best was because if you think about writing a reflection about something, if you think about writing a story about a time that you were abroad, you really have to think, you have to recapture, notice, and reevaluate your experience in order to get all those details necessary to create what you want to create. So I thought that that was a really nice definition of reflection. Jennifer Moon, who is another educator who talks a lot about reflection, I use one of her models later on. She says that reflection is indicative of the highest and deepest levels of transformative learning. So when we're encouraging people to reflect, we're not just encouraging them to think about things, but we're also encouraging them to get to a deeper center of learning. So it's an important process to have people go through. It's kind of like back and forth and confusing me. Okay. Types of reflection. There are 3 types of reflection that I mentioned in my paper. I think a lot of us are familiar with reflection after events. That's kind of the main reflection people think of. But there's also reflection in anticipation of events and reflection in the midst of action. And I argue that unpack can help with reflection, with all types of reflection. It's never too early to start reflecting on an experience. So if there was the program as a catalyst to get someone to start thinking about an experience they're going to have, and they could write something and submit it and have it in the journal. Oops. Reflecting in anticipation of events, that could get them going. Or even reading something as a passive participant in the journal. Like let's say someone is studying abroad in Thailand next semester, and somebody wrote something about their experience in Thailand. Having somebody read that is kind of getting them to reflect in anticipation of their trip. Reflection in the midst of action. Certainly, I would love to have people sending in submission pieces from abroad. I think that's great. Also, I think this fits really nicely with our international student population. They, being in the United States, are in the midst of their kind of intercultural interaction. And I think it would be very valuable to have pieces in the magazine talking about their experience learning about American culture. Being that my husband's from a different country, I feel like I see my American culture often because it's juxtaposed against a different culture. But a lot of people who don't have that experience, sometimes American culture can be very difficult to see. So I think this would be really interesting reflection after events. So this is Jennifer Moon's her model for reflection, and I thought this worked well for Unpacked because if you're going to be writing about something, you have a purpose, or even I use writing as an example, and I should say that Unpacked would take both writing, poetry, photography, or artwork. So I say writing, but I think it's applicable in all of those situations. If you want to submit something to the magazine, you have to go through a series of observation, reflecting, adding additional information, revisiting the experience, trying to remember the details, trying to put it together, standing back, looking at it, seeing if it was right, maybe looking up additional information, reflecting some more before you get to the final product. So I thought that model worked really well with what could potentially be going on in our participants, our active participants' mind while they're going through the process. Okay, moving into the second section, cultural adjustment. Again, I know I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys have all heard this before, but I'll try and move through relatively quickly. So cultural adjustment, the definition we have over here is culture is the acquired learning of a group that gives its members a sense of who they are, of belonging, of how they should behave, and of what they should be doing. Culture makes that group recognizably different from other groups. I think that last part is key. So if kind of culture defines you because of how you're recognizably different in some ways from other groups, if you go from culture A to culture B, and there are these differences that you have to adjust to, that's where you kind of run into these cultural adjustment issues. The first time that it was really mentioned, I guess, was by a Canadian anthropologist in 1959 named Calvero O'Rourke, and his paper Culture Shock, Adjustment to the New Cultural Environments. Culture shock is a term I was very familiar with, but I feel as I'm continuing professionally, I'm kind of shying away from it a bit and moving towards cultural adjustment, because cultural shock can have a negative connotation to it. It's something that you suffer from. Can I number 4 stand up and read that quote from the 2008 survey that I did from someone?
If someone can't adjust after spending only 2 months away from home, they have deeper problems for which they should seek psychiatric help.
It's a bit rough. So it's this idea of if you can't adjust, there's something wrong with you, and I don't think that that's a good way of thinking about it, because cultural adjustment is a very natural, normal process that many of us go through. Some of us have it a little bit more strongly than others, but I don't think people should feel that it's a negative thing. And we're seeing that a lot with our international students at WPI. We added this whole part to our international orientation where we talk about cultural adjustment. We showed them this YouTube video from Columbia Business School from a few years ago, and even though it's geared towards a graduate population, I think the person who talks in it is really articulate and can really kind of put it into a good way of packaging it for the students. So basically, again, you guys have seen this before. Cultural adjustment, it starts in the honeymoon phase. They first arrive, they're so excited to be here. Yes, I'm in the United States. And then after a few days or a few weeks, they start going into, as the guy in the YouTube video says, the what am I doing here phase. It's the point where they start, especially for students who are going to be, if you're looking at it from the international student perspective, be in the States for 4 years or longer, they're just kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of the first few weeks, and they realize I have a long way in front of me. Things that were really exciting before start to become frustrating. Maybe the language is giving them trouble. Maybe they just don't get all these little cultural idiosyncrasies that people giggle about and things like that. So that's kind of that first main phase of culture shock. And then you have a period of initial adjustment. Sometimes people just go through this first few. Sometimes people go through several cycles of it. But the initial adjustment, sometimes you have a language breakthrough, or you have, you start making friends with your neighbors or something like that. I'm going to keep going because I feel like people really know this part very well, and I want to make sure that we have time for re-entry. So again, culture shock or cultural adjustment can have a lot of symptoms to it. It is real. It's not something that you're kind of making up in your head. And I think if you give students the language to identify that this is real, then that can kind of help them move forward in the process. But in addition to giving them that vocabulary and that understanding that this thing is real, I think it's also important to let them know that another way to get through cultural adjustment is by connecting with people in your home culture. And one of the ways that you can do that is by teaching others about where you're from and connecting with them by telling them stories and getting involved. And talking about home can be very soothing sometimes. And doing that self-reflection of the process that you're going to can also kind of feed into kind of making it through the other side, and unpack can help students do that. Okay, so re-entry. Re-entry is the process of returning home after spending time abroad. It is a powerful experience that has the potential to allow for personal growth and to further a student's knowledge about the world and her place within it. So that's from the Study Abroad guide from S.I.T, so that might sound familiar to some of you. So re-entry can be very difficult for people. It looks similar to cultural adjustment. And again, I know you guys have seen this before. We'll try and move through relatively quickly. But re-entry can be more difficult sometimes than initial cultural adjustment because people don't necessarily expect it. They feel like, I'm coming home, it's not going to be a big deal, I'm used to this culture. But it can be more difficult because, first of all, that you're not expecting it, but you don't want to change back into the